Hey guys, it's Hunter. Welcome back to another video. If you've been on YouTube or like Facebook guitar circles, you've probably heard of Harley Benton by now. Thomann is like Sweetwater's EU equivalent, and Harley Benton is their house brand. Since they're their own dealer and distributor, they can keep costs down, and they've been making waves because the value is just insane. And for the first time, Harley Benton is getting into the headless game in the form of the Dullahan's Headless for about 400 bucks. Let's take a closer look. Before we go further, I'd love to give a shout out to Tilt Shifted and the rest of the amazing patrons that make this content possible, keep the channel going. If you'd like to directly support these demos as well, you can join the Patreon community through the link below, or even hitting the like button really helps out as well. Alright, so I wasn't sure whether I was even gonna make a video on these. The reason being, Harley Benton does have me on a small retainer to help design a certain number of guitars. And one of the first projects they had me on was for these Headless. But when I asked you guys in an Agufish, you brought up that it might be interesting to compare the initial concept to the final result, and maybe add some additional background information other reviewers might not be aware of. So yeah, there's the disclosure, just wanted to be upfront about that. Now there are two Dullahans that launch, a flat top and a carved top, or arched top rather. And the arched top is the one that we're going to focus on for this video. And this was originally supposed to be a single video for the two guitars, but they ended up being different enough that I decided to just go ahead and make two videos. That being said, I know a lot of people are trying to decide between the two, so the sound clips will still A-B back and forth, that way you can figure out which appeals more to you. Okay, all that out of the way, let's get into the meat of the video. Now I'll be totally honest, I'm not a headless player. I like guitar, and this is gonna sound super shallow, but in part because the guitar looks cool. You can make music with it, and it looks cool. It's just the best. But a lot of headless guitars, they do not look cool. They look weird. Non-fully formed abominations. There's like a few parts missing. And to be honest, I didn't want to make one, let alone two. But the Harley Benton team was like, no, this is perfect. You're not a headless player. Put together the concept of a guitar that would get you into headless. And don't just mean for me, I mean something that would be interesting for all the like-minded people out there. And so I pitched a headless TE, which was rejected. But that's the mindset of where I was originally coming from. And the Dullahans were the ones that finally made it into production. A lot of the specs are the same, as is the price, but Well, let me show you. And also bear in mind that the ones that I have here are not the production versions. These are the final prototypes that were approved for production. They look exactly the same, and they're actually the ones that were used in the photo shoot for the website photos, but there are some slight differences which I'll point out to as we get to them. All right, let's get into the Dullahan-AT. So the name Dullahan, it comes from Irish folklore. He's the Headless Horseman. He's also got an insane, irrational fear of gold for some reason. There's your useless trivia fact for the day. So this is the arched top. The general idea was a more traditionally inspired take on the headless concept. One of my favorite Harley Bentons is the CST-24T in Black Flame. So I wanted to take that and basically make it headless. I wanted it to appeal to people like me that were curious about headless guitars, but who are very much into the feel of a traditional guitar. That was the starting point, and then the body shape was changed slightly to make it more modern and balanced without a headstock. It's very light. It is a weight-relieved mahogany body with a maple cap, then a flame veneer with a black flame finish. For whatever reason, it has a slightly blue hue, but I dig it. It reminds me of like a dusk sky over a cloudy ocean. You know what I'm talking about? It's kind of funny. The original prototype archtop was not weight-relieved at all, and it was so fucking heavy. And I mean, I love heavy guitars, so I didn't think much of it, but Phil McKnight at TGA was like, yo, you have to weight relieve this or no headless player is even gonna touch it. So we did, and now it's much more comfortable. So that's the front. The back has a stained gloss finish. No tummy cutaways or anything. Again, the goal was a traditionally feeling guitar, but with the weight and balance benefits of the headless. Then there's a bolt-on maple neck with an ebony fingerboard, so fairly classic specs for a double-cut carved top guitar. And I'll talk more about the flat top in that dedicated video, but for contrast, that has an alder body with a maple fingerboard. And man, does it feel different. This is definitely the more traditional one. But that's not to say there haven't been some modern upgrades. There's a horn cutaway, and the neck heel has been shaved for easy upper fret access, spoke wheel truss rod adjustment. Again, going back to the first prototype, there was just this big friggin' hole at the end of the neck. If you can imagine it, it looked really stupid. So this looks better and it's easier to adjust on the fly. And then one of the most crucial modern features, well, let's put it this way. This is just one of those things, if we were gonna do a Harley Benton headless, didn't just want it to be something to tick a box. Like, headless, done. Wanted it to not only be affordable, but one of the best specs for the money. So on this $400 headless, the jumbo frets are stainless steel. They're well rounded, super smooth, and super hard, so you won't need to refret this guitar ever. Now, this being a late stage prototype, there are a couple of little things. Firstly, the HB logo. We debated for a while about where to put it. We thought about it on the headstock shelf, above the neck pocket, in the bridge cutout, but one of the key strengths of Harley Benton is that they're well-spec'd mod platforms. Right, you got the features like stainless steel frets, but they're inexpensive enough that you can swap out the pickups or whatever and really make them your own. So instead of plastering the logo in some awkward place, we decided to have it laser engraved on the back plate. That was one of the last design decisions that we made, so it's not on this one. It's just blank. The other thing is that there's a pretty sizable dent on the back of the neck. I don't know if it picked it up in the photo shoot when one of the other guys were playing around with it at the office or during shipping, but there it is, and it's not too bad. Again, this was just a prototype, so they were just like, whatever. So a big reason that Harley Benton hadn't jumped into the headless game before this is that the right hardware just wasn't available. A lot of the higher end guitars, as far as Harley Benton goes, I guess, the hardware is provided by WSC out of South Korea. It's high quality, but also affordable. And for the longest time, they didn't make any hardware for headless. Once they did, and it was verified to actually be good, that's when the headless project was launched. So the way that this bridge works is the strings go through the cylinders, which are also the tuners, and they run down to the lack of headstock past the nut where they're locked down by these little triangle pieces. So that means you will need a small Allen wrench handy to restring the guitar, which the Dullahans do come with. But it also means you can use regular strings, which in the past was something you couldn't do with most headless guitars. That was a pain in the butt. This is much more convenient. The one thing about this system, though, on this guitar at least, is that the shelf is a little high. So it's not a huge deal, but it can get a little cramped down there while restringing. Graphtec nut, though. The one thing I will say is that the tuners are so close together, which I'm not a huge fan of. It doesn't take away from the function, which is very good, and we'll get into in a second, but I don't find it as comfortable to tune as opposed to tuning pegs with regular separation on the headstock. But overall, there were 3 real questions that needed to be answered before this guitar made it past the first prototype. 1, does the hardware quality feel solid? 2, does the hardware secure the strings enough to keep the guitar firmly in tune? The answer to both those questions is yes. And 3, is the bridge actually comfortable to play, right? Because the saddles don't look like most other bridges on the market. Specifically, before I'd played it, I was concerned that they might be a little sharp on the palm. And the answer to that is, well, actually, it's quite comfortable. Once I started really playing it, I barely noticed how different the design is to my preferred Tune-O-Matic, and focused more on how nice the neck is. So the hard maple neck has a modern C profile. It's not one of those super shredder necks. The ebony fingerboard has rolled edges, and that's one of my favorite things that's showing up on more affordable guitars. It used to be that on budget-friendly guitars, they wouldn't bother rounding the edges, and it felt super cheap. Not the case with the Pro Series Harley Bentons, and as you can see from the B-roll, certainly not the case here. For pickups, we've got two Roswell HAF Alnico 5 humbuckers. These are the same standard ones found on a lot of other Harley Benton guitars. Now, something to be aware of, since the ones I have here are late stage prototypes instead of the production models, the wiring is actually different. The production model comes with a 5-way switch for bridge humbucker, neck and bridge single coils, neck and bridge humbuckers, neck in parallel mode, and then the neck humbucker. This archtop has a 3-way switch with a single push-pull pot to split both pickups. It was originally supposed to be this way because it's easier to understand, right? Like a 3-way with a push-pull to split the pickups, that's fairly standard wiring. Easy for the factory, easy for the player. But when we found a 5-way that was high quality enough and the right length to work with the thickness of the body, we used that instead. Now I'll run through all the tones that this is currently wired up for. Just know yours will have slightly different options. I'm running this through the Peavey 6505 Plus with Glenn Fricker's Mesa 4x12 IR for the dirty, then the Marshall with a Tweed 2x12 IR for the clean. So yeah, I'm really happy about how this came out. And I'm gassed that a lot of people seem to be enjoying this more traditional take on the Headless theme. It feels very familiar to anyone that plays archtop double cuts, then rolled fingerboard edges and stainless steel frets. Those would be great upgrades on any $400 guitar. But without the head, this is lighter, more compact, more streamlined, I guess. With these specs at this price, they're like a good, moderate introduction to Headless. At least that was the idea. And I've got a full rundown of the flat top coming as soon as possible. Make sure you're subscribed and you've got notifications turned on so you don't miss that. You know, I thought I'd like the arch top a lot more than the flat top, but well, I'll save it for that video. So if you enjoyed this video, do me a favor and hit the like button. These are, of course, just my opinions, and I'd love to know what you think, so let me know in the comments. Thanks to Toman for giving me this opportunity, and to Luke for mixing everything. Social media, merch, and Discord server links are in the description. As always, thanks so much for watching. You've been awesome, and I'll see you for the next video.